I recently had a prospective client ask me a pretty arresting question, which was, Martine, with so much emphasis on diversity training, why aren't they more effective? I should clarify that they weren't talking about me and my sessions and trainings, but their past experiences. This prospective client posed a loaded question, but a very important consideration. When we're thinking about implementing DEI, also known as diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplace, training is one of the first things that comes to mind. Here are just a few factors that lead to unsuccessful DEI, also known as diversity, equity, and inclusion training in the workplace, and how we can address them. Let me start with a disclaimer. I understand that companies have to remain compliant and are required by law to have employees go through certain computer-based trainings, also known as CBTs. I think that even those could be improved in a number of ways, but that's not exactly what this topic is about. I'm here to talk about instructor-led training, like unconscious bias or courageous conversations and so forth, and how we can make them more impactful and applicable to our employees. Here are some reasons that cause DEI training to not work. 1, when these sessions aren't positioned the right way and are mandated, employees feel forced and can be more resistant to the idea of DEI training. Furthermore, when we label them as trainings, we can suggest to employees one of two things. 1, that what employees are doing and how they're thinking is wrong and that they need to be taught something new. And even if that were true, how many adults do we know want to hear that their thinking is completely wrong? This can create a level of defensiveness which undermines our efforts. People might start to feel guilted or shamed and therefore defensive, especially in the area of DEI. When the wall of defensiveness goes up, the learning goes down or it stops completely. The other reason that training isn't the perfect label is because DEI doesn't just start and stop in a training session. We're all responsible to continue learning and engaging with others to gain new perspectives. But if we frame this work as training, then it can give people the excuse to not take ownership. Somewhere along the lines of the past year, diversity training developed a negative connotation. And that's what we're working against when we offer DEI programming, workshops, and discussions. So here are my solutions. 1, offer workshops, discussions, and conversations and simulations rather than labeling them as trainings. Changing the label also changes the tone. And while these conversations are necessary and critical, we should find ways to change the intensity of the session so people speak up and get the most out of the sessions without feeling like they're going to be reprimanded for saying the wrong thing. 2, package these sessions as part of a larger program that includes other coursework that isn't necessarily DEI focused, but applicable to the target group. For instance, if you're going to offer DEI sessions to managers, then why not make it part of your management development program? If you offer DEI to individual contributors, then make it part of your routine new hire orientation and or onboarding program. This further illustrates that DEI is a key part of strategic business initiatives rather than just a standalone idea or afterthought. Doing so also makes it much easier to require that target groups go through the program and therefore the DEI-focused workshop. Another instance when DEI training fails is when DEI workshops and conversations aren't championed by the CEO and the leadership team. My favorite type of client is one where the CEO is involved in DEI and understands the importance of training. Most times employees feel like the messaging to attend DEI workshops is tone deaf when it comes from a leader who isn't from an underrepresented group, but especially if the leader doesn't also engage in the learning and is somewhat hypocritical. That can also look like the CEO instructing employees to attend workshops, but he, she, or they don't attend themselves and don't require their leadership team to do so either. So my suggestion, 1, have the CEO specifically kick off the workshops and share the vision and strategy around DEI in the beginning of the sessions. 2, make sure that employees know that the CEO and the rest of leadership will go through or have gone through the same exact workshop that they're attending. Now, the final cause of ineffective DEI training is when they aren't supported by other larger company-driven initiatives. Think about it. Having a group of employees sit in a virtual live training room for 90 minutes to 2 hours is the beginning of collaboration and dialogue, but it can't be the sole platform. Learning should always be supported by a larger company strategy and the voice and endorsement from employees. I recommend developing your corporate diversity, equity, inclusion statement that states your intent around DEI. Begin to outline programs and identify employees in the form of a DEI council or employee resource group, ERG, to champion workshops and all the programming and strategy around DEI. Now, there are a number of other factors that we have to consider when establishing effective DEI training, like timing, format, and the tone of the messaging. Let me know exactly what you want to hear more of from me by jotting your questions in the comment section below.